So, Lone Rider here, and I want to talk about critics and reviews. The reason is lately I've seen when people are reviewing a movie or a TV show or even a Broadway play, a lot of times they don't really talk about the movie, the TV show, or the Broadway play. A lot of times they're actually talking about other things that aren't even in the film or the media, but they apparently are more interested in talking about than the thing they're actually supposed to be reviewing. We saw this, for example, with the movie Battle Angel Elita, a sci-fi movie about a cyborg. The media talked about, gender stereotypes and the appearance of the character, and they didn't really say all that much about the movie. And a lot of times when they did, their criticisms were so poorly constructed in terms of they were either criticizing the movie for things that weren't in it, or criticizing it for not containing things that it did, that I had to wonder if they'd even seen the film, or if they just read like a gender studies analysis. Now, I understand why this view might be tolerated when it comes to things like films or movies or books or plays or TV shows, because these are forms of entertainment, and they're all capable of communicating ideas. So on one hand, looking at the ideas that may or may not be in there isn't necessarily completely out of line. Of course, you also have to look at the actual performance itself, which for some strange reason many of these people seem to neglect to do completely. I guess they'd rather talk about gender norms and body types and stereotypes and things like that than was the storytelling good, or was the dialogue well written, or the stuff that like a critic of entertainment is supposed to be talking about, right? I mean, imagine if you were to transfer this to any other form of review, right? Somebody who reviews, let's say, consumer products. I mean, if I were to read a review, just try and decide whether I want to buy a new laptop or a new bicycle, right? So I go on, roadbikereview.com or something, right? And I'm reading reviews of this bike. And all the reviews talk about, well, the company illustrates its social conscience by their hiring practices and how they source materials. Okay, that's great, but it doesn't tell me whether or not I should buy the bike, whether or not it's a crap bike, how it rides, how much it weighs, what the gear ratios are. Stuff that I actually need to consider if I want to know whether or not I should buy the bike. If I'm reading reviews of laptop computers because I want to get a new computer, and all the reviews talk about, how environmentally conscious a company is, or how, they do this or that, good work in society, and they have a social justice conscience and all that. That's great, but it doesn't tell me whether or not the computer that they manufacture sucks, or whether or not it would be a good thing to purchase. And it's interesting that when it comes to consumer products that you can hold in your hand or ride down the street, such as a laptop computer or a bicycle, everybody kind of understands this, right? You want to know about the product. Information about the company's philosophy or other things might be, nice to know in addition, but the main thing you're there to learn about is the product and whether or not you should buy it. That's why it's a review. I think what people forget when it comes to things like films or TV or novels or Broadway plays is that a film or any other entertainment is also a product. Yes, it's an art form, but it's also a product. And if I want to know whether or not I should see a movie, the ideas that are contained in the movie or advocated in it, if any, may or may not have a bearing on that, but ultimately what's going to have a bearing on it is whether or not I think I would enjoy the movie. I think that maybe we need to look at how we do reviews and how we do criticism and say, what are these people doing, right? They're so busy talking about stuff that's not even in the film. They haven't bothered to review the film. And the world is getting so crazy, we're even seeing this stuff applied retroactively to things that came out years ago. I remember when they tried to do the new reboot or continuation of the X-Files, which was awful, by the way. The original X-Files is awesome, but the attempted comeback in 2016 and so forth were atrocious. But when it was in the news, because they were going to try and bring it back, there were several articles I read where people were recapping sort of the earlier series. And one in particular, well, there were several of these articles, of this type of article, but one in particular I read talked about cringeworthy X-Files episodes from the original series. Stuff that they felt has not aged well. Now, why they felt it hadn't aged well had nothing to do with the quality of the performance, with the believability of the story, with the acting, special effects, etc. It had to do with the perceived social wrong thing that, certain episodes weren't, I guess, deemed PC anymore. There was one episode that took place on an Indian reservation that they, I believe it was the episode Shapes, which was sort of a werewolf story. And they made a lot of, hay on that one, saying, they were like totally exploiting Native American culture and blah, blah, blah. And actually, no, they were just using it to tell a good story. And frankly, the Indian characters in that episode, especially the elderly guy who had been part of the American Indian movement and really didn't like the FBI, but ultimately ended up working with them, they made that episode for me. They were the most memorable part of that episode. The old guy in particular, he really, his character was, I wish they had shown more of him. So there were several episodes like this where there were things that, supposedly weren't PC, but were in no way disrespectful to the subject matter. But I guess just because they used it as a setting for a story, it was considered like a social gaffe or something now. And they were talking about all these so-called cringeworthy episodes. Some of these were some of the best episodes of the early seasons. So it's not even just that when something comes out today, people are going to review it in such a way that they're, it can be an awesome movie. It can be a great movie. It can be a great TV show, whatever. They won't see that because they're so busy talking about what they think may or may not have been going on in the mind of the director in terms of social politics rather than the actual quality of the product, which is what they're supposedly there to review. That's bad enough, but that's not only what they're doing. They're also projecting this nonsense back into the past and retroactively judging things that came out 20 years ago. And I would humbly suggest that, if you're a sociologist, this is all great to talk about. If you're like a film or TV or pop culture reviewer, this really isn't your bailiwick. Like, what the heck are you talking about? How about you pay a little more attention to the stuff that's in your own wheelhouse? The stuff that, like, people pay you to do, the stuff that's like your job, right? Again, if I want to know whether or not to buy a new laptop computer, information about the so-called social conscience of the company isn't going to help me decide whether the computer sucks or not. And same thing with the film, right? If I want to know whether or not I should go see a movie, information about what you think the director may or may not have been trying to say about some social or other commentary, that doesn't tell me whether or not the movie is going to be entertaining, whether or not it's going to tell a coherent story, whether or not it's going to be something I'd want to see. Although, ironically, when these type of critics do end up praising something, the type of critics that focus not on the subject matter but on the supposed mindset or social this or that, when they do end up praising something, usually I'm disinclined to see it. So I mean, in that case, it kind of works as a reverse metric. But I think what we really need to do as a society is start, because the culture is important to a society, right? We need to really start looking at the critics and the other people who really help sort of shape the culture, and we need to ask what the hell's wrong with them and what they're doing, because let's face it, I think they're literally not doing their jobs in some cases. They're again, if I want to know whether or not I should buy a bicycle or a computer, talking about the company's social philosophy isn't going to help me decide whether that product sucks. And in the end, a film, although it is potentially a vehicle for communicating an idea, is also a product. And your job as a reviewer, your primary job, is to review that product. This seems pretty simple. I mean, this isn't rocket science. I don't understand where we went off track here in this country. But I think we need to try and get back on it. Lone Rider out.